Theo Usherwood is with us to help us out with this and the other big stories of the day. I mean, it's only when I talk about years, Theo, like 2010, when Andrew Norfolk was writing this stuff, you think, how did this... It's now a decade and a half later.
And he was attacked for doing so.
Yes.
He was pilloried as being, you know, a mouthpiece for the far right. He had his... you know, there were attempts by certain politicians and those on the left to absolutely assassinate his character.
Yeah.
But the work he was doing was phenomenal. Yeah, there were others, but he was the one that was handed the files and revealed the absolutely monstrous detail of what was going on in these towns.
Yeah.
An absolutely incredible journalist, and sadly passed away so young.
Indeed, yeah, he was only 60.
60 on a routine appointment to see the doctor, and he suffered some health complications and died. And you know, those are, you know, Andrew Norfolk is the sort of journalist that I think most journalists aspire to be.
Yeah, 100%.
You know, he's the one, no fanfare, no glitz or glamour to the man, but very understated and so diligent in the way he went about his reporting and giving a voice and telling the stories of so many young girls and young women who'd been abused by these vile gangs.
And it did lead, and I don't know whether this was part of the Jay inquiry, possibly it was, that his evidence led to where they certainly established about 1,400 girls. This is just in that one area, 1,400 victims.
Yeah. And it's interesting, as part of today's announcement, it's been said the National Crime Agency is going to now look again at around 800 cold cases which have not led to prosecution. So they're going to look again at these cases to see whether actually it is possible now.
Yeah.
You know, I think given where we're at now, how many people, Dame Louise Casey, when her report is going to be published in a couple of hours or so, when that's published, it will again say that you know, for fear of being accused of being racist, you know, there was decisions not to, you know, to hold back investigations into the police, or police made, you know, held back in their investigations. Social services held back in their investigations, didn't get to the truth of what was going on because of it involved, and Dame Louise Casey is going to make this patently clear in her report. You know, predominantly these were cases perpetrated, abuse cases perpetrated by men of Pakistani heritage, and that's for so long this aspect of the case was glossed over at best, or just simply buried because the authorities didn't want to be accused of being racist.
But it's crazy because you would, you know, even an episode of Columbo would tell you, you'd look at commonality, whether it turned out that they were all football fans of one particular club, or they'd all come from one particular neck of the woods.
But this is the irony. There seems to be this resistance to recording the ethnicity of perpetrators when they go to court. So Alexis Jay, I was looking this up just before I joined you. Alexis Jay made this recommendation back in 2022. It still isn't being enacted. Dame Louise Casey is going to make the same recommendation today, where you have cases where you have widespread child abuse and you have individuals before court. It's absolutely imperative that the ethnicity of those who've been found guilty is recorded, even if they haven't been found guilty. You know, even if it's a case that's got to court and the case has collapsed for whatever reason, it's absolutely imperative that the ethnicity is recorded, and that's key, because then you can use all of that data to spot a trend, and the trend is obvious. But if you're just looking at one case and it's in one area and you're not recording the ethnicity, and you have dozens and dozens of cases, it's impossible then to go back and say, well, let's see if there's any commonality or any, because we haven't recorded the ethnicity and it's not recorded.
I mean, if you
that's one of the things that's been missing in all of these
100%.
cases.
And if you look at, I mean, just going back to the Andrew Norfolk aspect, when he was looking into Rotherham, and you know, 1,400 girls over a 16-year period.
White British girls.
White British girls. And if you extrapolated that figure and looked at it in other towns, if we were to, and this I think is a conservative, I'm throwing this out there not to be hyperbolic or mischievous, let's say there were 5,000 victims across the country, and many people would say it's much bigger than that. 5,000 victims, I mean, just let that settle for a second. 5,000 victims, one would assume something in the region of the same amount of perpetrators. of that ballpark. Some would have perhaps abused multiple girls. Just looking at it like that, that is massive. And if there was a commonality in those perpetrators, you'd look at that and say, OK, these are men. Pakistani, also interestingly from a very specific part of Pakistan as well. So that's, again, adds further kind of a point of discussion or interest or investigation. So why would you not look at that and say, well, what is it about that group of men and that group of girls? You'd naturally correlate that.
Because, and this is what's been found time and time again to be the case, that the authorities don't want to be accused of being racist because they're not recording the data. So they can, they've got a fairly, you'd have thought they'd have had a fairly clear idea of the, Andrew Norfolk, I remember him, he was talking about it, it was in his obituary, which was in the Times, and he was asked why did he decide to go and investigate, and it was because he was listening to a radio report, and the same surnames kept on cropping up, the same Pakistani heritage surnames kept turning up, and he suddenly thought, hang on a moment, I can't just go over this, I can't just gloss it, I've got to go back and investigate this particular case. And so he goes back and investigates. Now the authorities would have heard the same names, right? They'd have heard the same names, but instead of somebody thinking, well, you'd have thought anybody with any common sense would go, OK, I'm going to go back now and I'm going to look at this, just like Andrew Norfolk decided to go and investigate it. That was the reason why they didn't record 100%. The data, because they didn't want to then face an accusation that they're zeroing in on an individual's ethnicity, because that would then deem them to be racist.
And one counts, Rotherham in this case, you've got 1,400 girls, possibly more, and many people over the years, whether they were the girls or people who'd been tipped off or individuals, were telling either law enforcement or agencies or social services, education, counsellors and councils, and nothing happened.
Yeah, it was worse than that. I mean, in one case, the father turned up to find his daughter being abused. I mean, he had to go down and break the door down to get his daughter back. And then you had cases where social services, I think it was one case, wasn't it, where social services actually turned up at the supposed wedding, or am I right in saying, of a girl who was being abused by this man and then forced into this horrendous situation. It was absolute complicity.
Extraordinary. We will see what Yvette Cooper says a little later on. One would assume she might well then say, and this inquiry will be led by, and then they will announce usually somebody at the judicial.
So what's going to happen is what's going to happen is that we already know there's going to be one local inquiry in Oldham, and we know the government's announced 4 other local inquiries, but we don't know where they're going to be. And what's going to be established, and it's not quite the national inquiry that it's being billed at, is a commission. And the commission is going to oversee the local inquiries. The important detail is, and this is different to what was being proposed originally back in January by the government in response to this scandal blowing up again, is that this commission is going to have legal powers. So if a social worker or if a police officer is refusing to attend, then they can compel them to do so and to give evidence. And this commission is also going to have the ability to go to a particular area, but it is going to be time limited, and say you need to hold an inquiry, even if the local authority in that area doesn't want to hold an inquiry. So it can force that. So it does. There is more teeth to it, but what it is not is an overarching.
No, this
inquiry.
is, as you say, there's an umbrella of the other inquiries that we're already going to have.
Yes, exactly.
Let's move to this story, always on the radar as well. Keir Starmer apparently going to beg Emmanuel Macron to stop some more boats. I mean, we've sort of got to this stage at the moment, it seems, there, where we have this extraordinary situation where there's £500 million gone to the French, and there's all sorts of other initiatives, and each day we see more weird evidence of the French police standing there at a beach while people literally paddle past them and go, no, once skin has touched water, we can't go in because it's dangerous. It's like, well, they're literally just paddling in some not even shallow water. It's not even above their toe level.
But this tactic of begging the French or giving however many million quid to the French to stop these crossings at source on the beach clearly isn't working. Smashing the gangs. I know there has been some successful work done by the Home Office, but it is by no means, stopping this vile trade in human beings across the English Channel. That is, the way it, what has happened is, Keir Starmer has got rid of the Rwanda scheme. At the moment, there is no backup plan to the Rwanda scheme. He went to Albania to try and persuade the Albanians to do a deal where they would have some sort of return hubs where people could be sent once all of their appeals to remain in this country and asylum have been done and dusted. there's also talk of, changing the way, or trying to force judges to change the way they interpret the European Convention on Human Rights, so that actually only in the most extreme cases where it's obvious that an individual is going to be subject to death or torture, can a judge apply the ECHR to a particular case to allow somebody to remain in this country. Ultimately, there has to be a deterrent. You have to stop this at source by making Britain, a non-viable destination, so that the gangs know, and those who are paying the gang members money either in advance or arriving in this country and then working on the black market to pay off their debt in order to pay for the crossing. You have to show that actually you need to demonstrate that they are not going to be able to stay in this country, and they have no chance of staying in this country. But at the moment there isn't the setup, and what any hope that there had been a setup with the Rwanda scheme that was binned on the second day in office by Keir Starmer, and that's why this continues to happen.
It's the usual thing. It's already getting rid of something, but you tend to need to replace it with something, and quite quickly.
But Keir Starmer, when he scrapped the Rwanda scheme, yes, they'd spent 700 million on it, and yes, I think it deported one person, if that, to Rwanda, and they went voluntarily.
Wasn't that a volunteer? Was it? Yeah, that's right. And I think not just a volunteer. I think they also got paid as well.
Yeah. So look, it didn't wash as a scheme, but
it hadn't got up and running yet.
It hadn't got
really.
it. Yeah. And I think that this is what we're going to hear, particularly I think from the Tories have launched a review of it. Nigel Farage is pretty clear about where he is. That the blocker on all of this is the ECHR, and until we find a way to reform the ECHR. And by the way, the one thing I would say on this is we're not alone in our concerns about it. The Germans, they're facing a significant problem as well with this particular issue. That actually, if we can reform the ECHR, then it is possible to make the changes necessary. But at the moment, we're projected to surpass 50,000, which would be a record number of migrants crossing the English Channel this year. It's looking out the window. It's sunny.
It's like 26 degrees out there.
26 degrees. It'll be calm in the English Channel for the next week or so, and I think we're going to see an ever increasing number of people. And it's 4 million. £4 million a day we're spending on accommodation. It's an unsustainable situation.
Completely. Final one here, Theo, just briefly on this, if we could. Sir Keir Starmer says Labour must press ahead with welfare reform. The idea is to save £5 billion quid by 2030. It's not being popular. It's interesting, isn't it, when you look at Starmer, if you're on the right politically, you look at Starmer and say this mad old lefty, here he is. If you're on the left of Labour, like the Corbyn wing, you see Keir Starmer as sort of more right-wing than Kemi Badenoch.
Yes,
I know that's not hard, by the way.
I think what's interesting about this particular story coming out as it is right now is that there is this situation Keir Starmer's got himself into where he's U-turned on the winter fuel allowance. He's U-turned on this. He's U-turned on this inquiry because, of course, he's had to agree with Dame Louise Casey, and he's trying to say, on this welfare reform on disability benefits, which of course the reform is going to save, the hope is it's going to save around £5 billion. He is not prepared to waver. He's not prepared to change his mind because, of course, he doesn't want to get himself a reputation as being a Mr. U-turn.
No, I think unfortunately that's past now. He's stuck with that one. Theo, thank you. Always good to see you. Theo Usherwood with us here on the programme.